Good evening, Japan, Philippines, and the rest of Western Pacific out here. And good morning to you back in the United States. If you're watching us, it's the 13th of July. I got our evening tropical update for Typhoon Conson or Basyang, if from the Philippines. I know there's two different names on it out there. Philippines name their typhoons different than the Japan does, by the way. So if you ever see the two different names, they are talking about the same system. But for simplicity purposes, we're going to call this system 03 Whiskey. So I'm just going to refer to it as that. So we're going to zoom in on the IR satellite shot here. Okay, now 03 Whiskey is currently right around 980 millibars. It hasn't intensified as it's moving over Luzon here. That's due to two reasons. Low vertical wind shear and high ocean heat content on both sides of the island. You can see to the south, though, to the southern part of the system, it is getting tore up a little bit. This is due to the mountainous terrain through that area. But outside of that, though, that's the only area that's really being affected by it. And also that's in the outer rain bands. Now the center core of the system, though, still a lot of convective clouds, a lot of cumulonimbus, and winds still sustained at 65, gusting up to 85 knots. Now that is on the Japan scale, which is at a 10-minute interval. So that's pretty strong winds for 10 minutes out. JTWC actually warns on a 2 minutes, so sometimes their winds can be higher than Japan's. It's a couple of rules out here that is kind of hard to get used to. The Philippines, Japan, and the U.S., we all do it slightly different. So sometimes you'll see the warnings slightly different, but overall they're basically on the same difference. The 10-minute scale, though, usually the winds are going to be lower than the 2-minute scale for obvious reasons. Okay, now they big thing to worry about today, though. The system made landfall earlier today in Quezon. Sorry if I'm butchering that again, guys, but it's going to be moving just to the north of Manila. That was a big worry out for today, was where it was going to make landfall and where it was going to move in relation to Manila. Moved just north, so that puts it on the left side, Manila on the left side of the storm, which actually decreases the winds up to 30 knots on this system. The storm's currently moving to the west about 15 knots. So if you go to the north of the system, that adds 15 knots to it. If you're on the left side of the system, it's going to subtract 15 knots. So a 30-knot difference there. So Manila kind of left out in this. They're only at signal warning 1 if you're in the Philippines. You know what I'm talking about there, and that's a pretty weak system. Now the big worry about this, though, is still, and continuing to tomorrow, is going to be rain, especially in the low-lying areas. Soil up in there is relatively unstable, so anywhere in low-lying areas, the chance for a flash flooding and mudslides after the fact is definitely very, very high. And Pagasa, they put out their warnings, all talking about that, and that's the biggest thing that they're stressing is flash floods and mudslides. So we're going to move on to the enhanced IR here, and I just want to point out one more time that the highest convective clouds located within the system, they're still there. The storm is still maintaining its strength, so there's still a lot of dangerous situations with it as it runs over Luzon here. Now, we're going to move on to the forecast here, and the good news is that as it re-emerges out into the South China Sea, it's actually not going to re-intensify. It's going to gradually decrease in strength. Now, this is due to two reasons. As it moves farther out to the west, it's going to encounter lower ocean temperatures. Now, that's relative. It's still relatively high. It's well above 80 degrees, but it's not going to supply that intense heat that it got in the Philippine Sea. The other reason is going to be an increase in vertical wind shear, and if you've been watching these updates, you would know that it's going to run into about 20 to 30 knots of shear as it heads off to the northwest towards Hong Kong. So that's the biggest worry. Excuse me. That's the biggest factor we're going to take place into this is its gradual decrease in intensity is going to be that wind shear. So let's move over to the JTWC warning, though. Okay, now they're moving a little bit farther south than the Pagasa is going to put out on it. They're taking in the high pressure aloft just to the north of the system. Now that's actually going to keep it to the south. Now Pagasa is saying that that storm is going to recurve a little bit more north, and that's what climatology kind of dictates more as well. So I would go more with what the Philippines are saying. Kind of one of the few times I'll go against what JTWC saying here, but I think that the Philippine is likely going to recurve just to the north of Hong Kong. Now, The speed and the strength, they're both set on, both agreeing, and it's only about a 100-mile difference, so not too much of a difference. But climate would dictate recurvature in the South China Sea. Now, I know we don't go strictly off of climate, but in this case, it looks like that's what's going to happen, as well as a troughing aloft over southern China that's going to kind of push that system off to the north as well. So in either case, it's going to de-intensify, and likely Hong Kong is going to be spared on this. So let's move on to the vorticity chart here. Now, another thing I want to note on this, though, is that there is still a lot of positive vorticity. If you don't know this chart, red is indicating upward vertical motion, blue indicating downward vertical motion. That's what we're talking about when we say vorticity. Positive vorticity is upward, negative is downward. We say this a lot when we're talking about formations of lows or strong high pressures. And you can see over where the Typhoon is located, there's a lot of red. That's indicating a strong upward vertical motion, a lot of low-level convergence, upward divergence. So moving on that note, though, we're going to move on to the satellite shot showing low-level convergence. I do want to note that over Japan, you see some low-level convergence up there. That's because there's a baroclinic low setting up there. I already noted that earlier. Now, down over the Philippines, you see that the low-level convergence on this sat shot provided by SIMS is right around 20 to 30. Over the Japan, it's right around 10. That's showing that this low over Philippines very strong in comparison to the other ones around it. Also want to note, though, you notice just to the north of the Philippines here, it's -5. That's that high pressure that we're talking about that's keeping it just to the south of it. It's suppressing it, and that's also another reason why, as the storm moves out into the South China Sea and starts to veer to the northwest, it's going to start to get some more suppression and gradually weaken. So that's another good news as we get into this next several days. But well, that's all the update I got for today, though. If anybody has any questions or comments, please let me know, and stay safe out there. So, all right, bye.